right, I reckon it's time to get going. I'm going to click share my screen. I'm going to do some obligatory set of slides, but then this is an open session, so I think we'll then jump right in. Welcome everybody to this week's Ask Us Anything. Our topic for today is log monitoring. My name is Chris Jones. I'm a group product manager here at Platform 9. I look after our Kubernetes platform. And today I'm really hoping to get some great questions from everybody that's online and help answer your questions around log monitoring, do's, don'ts, platforms we've used, what our customers are using, what we use internally, all of that goodness. Happy to help where we can. If you're new to Platform 9 or want to engage us and wondering the right way to reach out during this session, we've got a Slack channel that you can get to, slack.platform9.io will get you to the Slack. And there is an AMA session channel in there that you can jump into. Otherwise, feel free to ask questions in the Q&A within Zoom or the chat within Zoom. And if you're brave, feel free to raise your hand and we can unmute and we can do some live question and answering. If we do that, we do ask that we'll try to keep it to a small number of questions so we make sure we have enough time to answer everyone's questions if we have multiple people looking to reach out and chat. As I said up top, this session is all on log monitoring. So hopefully we'll get through, different approaches, different options out there in the market, some good practices that we've seen. And if we get time, we can try to step through a tutorial for Elasticsearch. We can definitely do demonstrations on getting FluentD, which is a really core piece to logging going, or even FluentBit as well. And this week I have David online with us. I'll let David introduce himself.
Well, thank you, Chris. I'm David. Welcome everybody. So I guess I kind of compliment Chris on the other side of things. He's covering our Kubernetes products. I am covering developer relations. So he gives me all the good things, the platform and everything to run my applications on. And as he spoke about the log monitoring, you not only want to monitor the logs from your Kubernetes system and all the core components, but you also want to monitor logs from your applications, your workloads running in those clusters. So I'm here to talk about that.
Excellent. All right. And with that is the entirety of every single slide we put together for today. Because this is a Q&A session. I've got heaps of stuff we can talk to and jump into. Occasionally I put slides together, but I think if there's no questions and answers, I'm just going to go straight into a system I set up quickly yesterday afternoon, just to sort of show people how easy it can be to get going. So whilst the chat is empty and the Q&A is empty, I'm going to go straight into that.
Let's do this.
End of PowerPoint slide.
Thank you.
And into Platform 9. For people that have never seen Platform 9 before, if you sign up, first thing you'll see when you log in is our dashboard page. It'll be pretty much full of zeros. First thing you want to do is just click Add Cluster and add a cluster. So if you've got a VM that you can run on your laptop with Ubuntu or CentOS, great way to get going. We've got a CLI you can just download directly onto any operating system, be Ubuntu or CentOS for running a cluster, and run prep node as the command. That'll attach the node to Platform 9. You can come back in here and just click one click, give your cluster a name, choose a Kubernetes version, and then select your node and click create cluster. In fact, I could probably just do this right now. AMA.
Well, and while you're typing all that out, for those of you who don't have infrastructure sitting around and servers sitting around like Chris does, you could also plug in your AWS creds or your Azure creds. And then we don't have to go through all the node prep and all that stuff because we'll take care of everything for you. Spin up all the nodes, get them all going, and then you just got clusters more or less at the tip of your fingers.
Correct. This form is going off. Once it completes exactly the same process for VMs, physicals, AWS, and Azure, it'll always land you on this node health screen, and our software will start deploying and it'll start telling you exactly what's going on there. We are not going to watch this. That's not a great use of people's time. If you have existing clusters, you can also import a cluster. Right now, if I go to import cluster, you can do this for EKS. AKS and GKE will be introduced very, very soon. Our next release is coming out at the end of June, and that will bring in AKS and GKE support as well. So whilst that is off and going, this main dashboard is where you'll see all of your clusters. You can link out to deployments of Grafana that we put out there that you can one click. It'll get going and start showing all of the data from your nodes. There's a number of different dashboards that we ship with, so you can see issues with volume claims, operating system file storage utilization, the Kubernetes API server, the individual nodes, if you want to see those. So all the great sort of metrics, but the piece this doesn't cover is log data, and that's kind of why we're here today. If you want to get logging going, the kind of the first step, if you've never approached this in an environment, is to deploy a capability to collect those log files. I think there's lots of great options out there in the industry. As a company, Platform 9, we strive to use open source and make open source easy for everyone in the community. And one of the great options for getting your log files and scaling that with Kubernetes clusters in your applications is FluentD and FluentBit. There's many solutions that integrates with. Other great alternatives, if you already have an enterprise solution in place, is to deploy what is coming native with the likes of Sumo Logic or Loggly, Splunk, Object Rocket, what have you. So if I wanted to deploy FluentD or FluentBit today into these clusters, I'm going to make use of the app catalog that Platform 9 has brought into this platform. First step is adding a repository. I've already added the FluentD repository that's upstream. I'll click edit so everyone can see what that's about. Super easy, right? They've got a GitHub repo with their Helm charts. Just give it a name, put in the repository URL and click save. If you add new clusters and you're on our free tier and you want to add this access to this chart to those clusters, just come in, click save, and it will always update it to the latest list of clusters. And that's how you get applications to display within this repository. Deploying FluentD and FluentBit is not a complicated task, but it does require a little bit of knowledge and know-how. And I think the first step in learning that is understanding this concept of an output. FluentBit and FluentD are quite often used within the elk stack, and you'll notice that both of the applications, if you're deploying it via Helm, will come with that built in. So this output file here, if I zoom in, make it nice and big, you'll see that it's looking for Elastic and it's looking for an Elastic host. And some other parameters that Elastic can take as an output from FluentBit to format the data as it's coming in. So this is the main line to change if you're in the world of FluentBit.
If I could, Chris,
Go for it.
Actually, I'm also thinking about inputs here. So for those that, I mean, we're focused here using FluentBit and all that as I want to take the logs and I want to send them somewhere so I can, consume them. But where do the logs come from? How did they get here to begin with? And so there's a couple of different ways. In Fluent, you specify it as an input. And then it's obviously wherever it's deployed, the node that it's deployed on, it's going to go look in that place or monitor that thing, right? In this case, as Chris is showing, it's looking at a path. So on the node that it's deployed on, it's going to look at this path at anything in star.log, and it's going to specifically say, I'm looking for star.log, anything with the .log extension, and I'm expecting this format, as Chris was showing you, the log stash format, right? And so now we've taught Fluent, here's where to go to look, here's the format that you're going to get, now go send them somewhere. And that's the inputs and outputs thing. From an application point of view, you wouldn't necessarily, in fact, you'd never count on a file being there, right, inside your container or something. In that case, you're going to be looking for standard out, right? That would be the cloud native pattern to follow, where your application is writing to the console. I come from a .NET background, so I like to say the word console, but it's standard out, right? That's what you're looking for. As long as the applications are writing there, then Fluent can watch standard out and can then as an input, and then can send them over to the output and continue on. So just a little bit of where do these originate from? Why are they even here? There are many different logs happening within Kubernetes. Quite frankly, I don't know the list of all of them. But in the end, this is how Fluent's going to find the logs, know the format of the logs, and then do all kinds of magical things with the logs.
Excellent. That's a great tip to get started. The cool thing about Helm, if you mess this up, you can just delete the deployment, or you can just go and edit the deployment, update this, click deploy again, and it'll go and update that application as it's running. For example, if I come into deployed apps and I go in and look at that cluster, this one's connecting to the clusters that's currently building. So just give it a moment. I'm going to choose cluster 03. I know it's a great name. And look at our FluentD AMA. This is actually a FluentBit deployment that I did yesterday. The cool thing about cluster 03 is that it's actually a cluster running in EKS, and Platform 9 deploy this app into it. So if I click edit here, it's going to pull up the configuration of that particular FluentBit deployment. If there was a new version out, I could change the version it's running, for example. I'm just going to zoom in here. This particular FluentBit, I actually said I'm going to use Splunk Cloud. So I try something different, see how it works. So all I needed to do was go and figure out the output for FluentBit. I'm not going to lie, that did take a bit of time on Google. Yeah, all these logging vendors have their own solutions for this, right? So if you just want to go full in on Splunk, they're like, yeah, just run this thing. It's magic. I said, well, I have FluentBit. I want to point my FluentBit to Splunk. So their docs will outline this output statement in a slightly different format to this, not a single line. All these /n's, new line characters, and there's 4 space characters after this. If you get that wrong, it will break. perils of Kubernetes. Name Splunk, matching basically everything. Host is my my Splunk Cloud account. This is a trial. The port number, and then there's a token. I'm not going to be that brave because then you could do anything to my current Splunk. So I've clicked deploy. That's running. If I want to see that workload, I can come here, go to this cluster, choose the AMA namespace, and you can see FluentBit's running. I want to see the logs. I can click on it, and you can see it's running right here. If you get this wrong, FluentBit will deploy, and then it's going to tell you it can't connect. I actually found the log messages were quite helpful whilst I was trying to figure this out. But once you're done, you're instantly going to get results. So,
sorry, one other point before we switch over to Splunk is that Fluent is usually deployed as a daemon set, right? And so that daemon set is able to watch those files. Sorry, I meant to mention this before, but trying to make things not so magical, right, and a little more programmatic and scientific, that daemon set is running on your nodes and watching those files. So it's a process, right? There's nothing magical here. It is a process running. It's been configured to say, look at these files, forward these files on to this URL using this port with these creds. And then as Chris is switching over to Splunk, here it is. It is piping those or streaming those logs over to his Kubernetes instance, or I'm sorry, his Splunk instance.
Yeah, and that was all I did. That was pretty easy. I'm not a Splunk expert. You know, I know what it is. I know what it does. I've really just come in and said search for everything using their smart mode, and it's pulling out all these fields. Kubernetes hosts, you can see here, these are all of my EKS nodes in my cluster. And these ones are actually another cluster I have running that are on VMs within the Platform 9 cloud itself. So, you know, I can see how often this one's getting messaged. You can filter for just the logs by that by clicking on it. I'm not here to teach people about Splunk. What I really wanted to do is kick off the conversation, show how easy it is to deploy FluentBit, even as a starting point. And I can see we have questions coming in, which is why we're here. So let's go. Actually, people are just asking for recordings. Yes, we will record this. So this is FluentBit deployed. The next one I think that a lot of people look at just for I want to get logs going is FluentD. It's a very similar deployment mechanism, and it deploys FluentBit for the actual log collection. FluentD is just doing some aggregation capabilities on top. David, do you have any details about sort of the effects of using FluentD and what can be achieved?
I do, Chris. Thank you for asking. So differences between FluentD and FluentBit. My list is by no means exhaustive, but this is just, you know, overall, why should I care about one over the other? For me, it really comes down to availability more than anything. FluentBit is a daemon set, and it's really just going to move your logs from here to there. So as we all know, as things move between networks and all that, things happen. Logs get dropped. That's what it ultimately comes down to, right? They're not a complete set sometimes, especially if you're moving from, some cluster in one cloud over to some other cloud provider, that those bits have got to move a very long way. So inevitably things are not going to totally line up. And when it comes to logs, you really need continuity. So FluentBit may not be your best option. FluentD is a more complete distribution, and really the original intent was FluentD. FluentBit kind of came out of that. And FluentD is going to actually if memory serves, is going to deploy a store, a temporary store. And so it's going to give you the option to possibly queue up logs, right? And then drain the logs out. You're still going to have to say, here's the logs, I want them to go here, somewhere else, right? You got to give the destination and output, sorry. But along the way, it gives you more highly available options for processing the logs and for making sure that you have good continuity.
Excellent. I think that's a great overview between the two. Both of them are very similar in setup. I'm going to skip over most of this Helm chart because I want to come down here for our configs again. Once again, out of the box, FluentBit and FluentD, which we're now looking at, it's going to have a sources. Where am I looking? Filters, as well as our output configuration. Once again, it's got all the new line characters in here, right? If you were to look at any guides, everyone's going to be rendering this as, multiple lines underneath each other. So we've got our output configuration, what are we matching, and then the type, Elasticsearch. This is an important element to understand. When it comes to the FluentD, there are an endless list of plugins. And as with most platforms that exist in the world, they don't ship with all those plugins because you probably don't need all 150 that exist. So out of the box, FluentD ships with Elasticsearch as a core plugin, which means if you configure an output and you put in type Elasticsearch, then you'll be able to specify a host. Now, if you're running Elastic within the cluster that you're sending this to, you could actually use a cluster IP. If this is external, you would then use something that is accessible either by IP address or domain name to this application running within your Kubernetes cluster. You specify the port. 9200 is the default. So if you're using the Elastic Helm charts or just following their deployment guides, that's going to be the default and that's going to work. No default path. Then you'll have a username and password. Once again, this will change based off of your deployment. Now,
it's worth taking a moment to think about where are my logs going, because it's so easy to look at all those outputs, those 150 outputs, and say, oh, sweet. Well, I'm just going to send this over to CloudWatch or something like that. But you got to think about the path that it's traveling, right? And what's going to happen along the way. And so, like Chris made a point about running Elasticsearch within the cluster. That means, as far as availability of data and everything goes, you're on the same network, possibly in the same rack of machines, right? So your continuity of logs and everything is pretty darn high. And then once you're storing in an Elasticsearch and you have some persistent volume behind that, right? So you can really manage what's really happening with your logs. And then once you get the logs to Elasticsearch or something like that, then drain them from there onto something that's a little more consumable, like CloudWatch that has a query engine, all that stuff, or Splunk or whatever. But these are just things to think about, as you're getting these logs out, and it's so tempting to just send them somewhere right out of the gate. But, you got to think about what am I doing to my logs, and how long do they have to, or how far do they have to travel to then be stored? And is there going to be loss along the way?
And storage, I think this is actually a great topic for logging. There's lots of great solutions out there. Self-hosting, Elastic, and then Kabana is what we use for the search and dashboarding piece. This whole platform that I've been demonstrating off right now, what we call the SAS Management Plane, is a application running within a Kubernetes cluster. Each one of these deployments is a unique instance that each of our customers get, whether you're on a free platform or growth or enterprise. And we need to make sure that platform is running, performant, stable, you're not having problems. For our paid customers, we have an SLA that backs them. So we need that data. And our applications log to stand it out. And we have FluentD deployed, and it's getting all those logs, shipping it to an Elastic that we run, and then we have Kabana to visualize that data. And we use that for a lot of telemetry. You know, as a managed provider, we've got, you know, a bunch of certified Kubernetes support guys, but we also use a lot of software and analytics to make sure that your clusters are up and healthy as well. So we use Elastic and Kabana for a lot of that analysis work, continuous improvement and figuring out, you know, any bugs that might be out there or issues that people are having, or, you know, problems that pop up all the time in Kubernetes clusters, and then build that back into the product as well. So we run that in a completely external cluster. And for latency and data, we try to keep that within the environment it's running within. So we've done a lot of stuff in Equinix Metal. So we try to keep that on a separate cluster, separate hardware. We use a lot of Kubernetes on bare metal, and we avoid ingress and egress costs on that as well. So if you are running in a cloud, I would really encourage you to think about, where's my data transitioning to? You know, is that particular cloud service what I want? Does that fit with my enterprise monitoring and log strategy? Or should you move on to a Splunk, a SolarWinds, one of the many Elastic hosted managed services out there, like Object Rocket and stuff like that. But then you've got to look at latency, ingress and egress costs, and how much that solution costs you versus running it yourself, which, you know, comes with another set of challenges too.
But the nice thing, if we circle this back around to Fluent, the nice thing is you can specify a collection of outputs. You're not just stuck with one, and you can apply filters. So anything that is in, let's say, I'm going to simplify here, anything that is of type error, right? My log is an error. My filter is going to catch that. And it says anything that I get in as an error, I want to go to my local Elasticsearch, and I want to go to, I don't know, some storage for PagerDuty, or, you know, some dashboard that we have up, well, if you're in an office, some sweet, you know, dashboard monitoring the platform or something like that. So this is the power of Fluent. It's like, I don't have to hard code or hardwire my logs to this output or this thing. I can just say, output the log somewhere generically and let Fluent watch that and decide how many different places it should go and when it should go to those different places. Very powerful.
That is a very, I guess, nifty, handy piece of capability.
Yeah.
And it really could. You could say, I'm going to use everything locally here just for application logging, and keep that within a cluster, or maybe a cluster that you run and just maintain locally. And then you know that your error events for your incident management might escalate up through a different path to a paid hosted solution that you're not operating yourself, for example. So then you're sort of increasing the resiliency of your monitoring platform and the strategy there. What I'm going to do, I'm going to finish this little conversation about the type here. Elasticsearch is the type of output. So FluentD is going to go and look for this in its plugin list. And if you put something here that it doesn't know about, once again, those container logs are going to tell you straight away. It's going to say, I don't know what that is. So where is that specified? There's actually there's a section within this values.yaml file, as it's called for Helm, where you can specify plugins. And you'll see that this is blank and it's here. There's not a great amount of documentation on these Helm charts, unfortunately. After spending some time getting ready for this blog, or for this session, I was like, well, I think it's time to write a couple of blogs on this. You can just specify the plugin right here. But the next question is, well, where do I get that plugin's name? So another platform that I've got up and running here is Logly. I'm going to close that pop-up and close that pop-up. And you can see I've got this log data coming in. This is the last 12 hours. If I blow this out to 3 days, you're going to see that I've only just started collecting it. You can see log messages over time, and all the raw logs are down here. Once again, I'm not a Logly expert. I'm just showing you that this is the output and sort of how did we get there. So, I signed up for Logly, went to FluentD, and I was like, I want to use FluentD to get my logs to Logly. And I landed on this documentation page, and everyone's like, wow, they're really going to documentation. And it said, just run this command. And I'm like, all right, that's cool, but I'm not in an operating system. I'm in Kubernetes. And I was like, this doesn't help me. And anyone that's sort of typed in FluentD plus something, you might land on a set of instructions that look like this. So, I sort of scratched my head and I was like, well, maybe this is the plugin name. Turns out, thankfully, that is actually the plugin name. So in that home chart, if you're going to use it, just put this in as the plugin name, exactly as you see it here. And then the output is this. Obviously, the format's slightly different. This is not going to work just by copy and pasting. And you need your token, which is inside of your Logly account. It's pretty easy to get to. So then when you go back to this Helm chart, you add your plugin here. I will show you a finished one of these. And then your app type, don't change that. You put in Logly, and then you also grab your Logly URL. So to see this running, how my logs actually getting there, I'm going to go back to my deployed app section, and it is not going to be on this cluster that's loading right now. I believe it is on Portworx. Look at a few of these running. Bear with me while I find the one that I've got deployed. FluentD, edit. So all of this is going to go into a blog so people can read and follow along with ease. So once again, if I zoom in here, you will see our output configuration, and type is Logly URL, goes along at some point, it gets to my token, which starts here. And then to make it work, all you need to do is make sure that the plugins is listed.
And I want to be clear, I followed you there. And the reason you're doing the plugins is because Logly isn't included out of the box with FluentD. So you had to tell it to go get it, right?
Correct. So
okay.
If I go and look at this actual workload, remembering which,
and that was the reason that that plugins collection was blank on the other one, because Elasticsearch is out of the box. Gotcha.
Yeah, let me refresh this pod information. So, great giveaway. This is just the pod log. This is great development, great output, and really does help. I think new users get starting. Viewing container logs, if you're trying to do this through kubectl, can be a little bit of an arduous activity. So if you're using Platform 9, our workspace dashboard, all containers, you can just go straight to their logs by clicking the container log button. And now I've lost my, I probably closed it. Let me click it again. So I click that, and you can see here immediately, successfully installed Fluent plugin. Brilliance of Helm and how people are packaging their containerized applications within it. Those values.yamls charts, they always have a default. All we did was override that, or actually provide an additional parameter, and Logly's working. You can see here all of the defaults. I did not specify any of these whatsoever. So you can see Fluent Elastic is in there. and a bunch of other ones. So if you're following documentation and it says, run gem install, and you're using the Helm chart, just go and review that within the plugins section of the Helm chart. And then it'll get going. If you don't have that, it'll actually just error out right about here. And it will say, hey, I don't know what it is you're trying to connect me to. Please fix it. If you get the URL wrong, it'll say exactly the same thing as well. So it does provide pretty good logs. And if you like instant gratification, like most of us do these days, you'll start seeing data like instantaneously within whichever logging output that you've decided to use. That is how easy it is to get FluentD and FluentBit up and running. There's a question out there. Can we use this with micro K8s or Ubuntu OpenStack? Micro K8s, you can. If you're trying to keep your footprint small and light, FluentBit might be the better option there. There's multiple ways you can install and deploy applications in a Kubernetes environment. So you could use Helm. You could just use the tried and true kubectl apply -f and point to the upstream files in a GitHub location, or if you've cloned a repository, deploy it locally. Be slightly more involved deploying it that way. Helm does keep it very easy. In terms of Ubuntu OpenStack, I don't know if David's ever deployed FluentBit or FluentD into OpenStack. I personally haven't. They will work, right? Both these applications weren't built originally for just Kubernetes, so you can deploy it as a standard application.
FluentD's been around a lot longer than Kubernetes, and so I'm OpenStack specifically haven't installed it there, but going to Ubuntu, we know where logs commonly are being written. So putting on running the daemon, the FluentD daemon on an Ubuntu instance, watching for logs in a certain place, and then sending them somewhere else, very doable. So pretty confident that OpenStack would work okay there.
Indeed. We have 5 bare metal servers which are identical. Yeah, if you're running OpenStack and then Kubernetes on top, you sort of got like 2 layers of infrastructure provisioning right there. Pros and cons to running just Kubernetes or just OpenStack if you're trying to get a blended environment where you can do VMs and then a Kubernetes layer next to it. That's one way of doing it. Those bare metal servers that are running the OS, you could definitely just deploy FluentD as a log collector on that base level. We're a managed OpenStack provider as well. Our SAS Management Plane that you're seeing here, we have a almost identical platform, which is the managed OpenStack layer. That's the OpenStack control plane itself. And we're using log forwarding into Elastic from that as well for our OpenStack layer as well. I'm not 100% certain if we've got FluentD running or if we've just done FluentBit across the control plane.
I think you're logging within the cluster, I believe. So FluentBit would seem like the right choice there. A little lighter weight.
Yeah, that's what I'm pretty sure. It's just forwarding logs to Elastic, and they're all pretty closely physically located to each other as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're, yeah, definitely. If you've got both running, that's OpenStack and Kubernetes. And you're trying to correlate problems.
Oh, that'll be fun.
Yeah, like a Nova log to a
Well, everybody's
sort of pod
everybody's
log and
sharing the
log and
same
stuff like
clock
that.
there, right? As long as everybody's sharing the same clock, you can go off time.
Yeah, so if you're just running bare metal servers, our advice, right, we're a managed Openstack provider and a managed Kubernetes provider. Unless there's a reason that you need virtualization, we would always say, let's go straight to bare metal, right? We're on Equinix Metal. We run a lot of clusters on that. And, right, a lot of the clusters I build are on Ubuntu OS 18 or 20. And we literally just specify masters, workers. You could blend both of those together. Once again, production would advise not to do that. And then just deploy. We're about to GA support for Fluent, Bit and FluentD. So as part of the platform, the monitoring that I showed would be built in, and it would just be a case of deploying, either FluentBit or FluentD, depending on what you want to do, and pointing it to an output, just as I went through today. So if you're building an environment and you just want Kubernetes, our advice would be to stay on bare metal. If you wanted VMs and Kubernetes, you can see here we have virtual machines in early access mode. That's using a technology called KubeVirt. And once again, with FluentD running or FluentBit, you're going to get those log files that are outputting about that pod information. And then within that VM, again, within itself, you could make as part of your images a FluentBit daemon set that just boots and runs with each of those nodes.
Layers upon layers of Fluent.
Yeah, you just got to put it everywhere. Full disclosure, for a lot of my career, I lived in the systems management application performance management space. When I saw logging came along and everyone's like, wow, you can do all these things, I used to just joke with people. I was like, Splunk made logging cool again. Right. And there's a lot of power you can get with that. But I'd also, say to people that are on this AMA, logging is an important part of an enterprise monitoring strategy. I personally believe, and there's a lot of people out there that look at this the same way, logging is not going to give you absolutely everything you need, because it's just giving you the raw data, and then you're doing a lot of investment to understand about what that's telling you. The monitoring platforms that are being hand built, be it open source and the Elk stack, or all the way through to your New Relics and App Dynamics, there's a lot of intellectual property that's being invested in those products that allow you to quickly see exactly what's happening. You don't have to build dashboards, but what you're getting for paying for those platforms is the ability to say what's going on inside my JVM. And logging and having log data around that really does help. So I always say the two together are awesome. Minimum have one. Either have logging if that's the quickest path to success for the way you operate and where you are if you're a developer. Maybe that's the best path. Definitely don't run blind, especially in Kubernetes.
I think we got a couple of questions coming in here.
We do.
FluentD we can run on our bare metal servers. That's what you're saying. We want it easy. We can just use Platform 9 instead of MicroK8s or OpenStack. Well, of course, Platform 9 is going to make it easier. We need something reliable here, just as easy.
Yeah, so the question for attaching bare metal servers, I'm just going to change to this screen. This is a staging cluster. Apologies, sometimes I do absolutely crazy things. Exactly the same platform, just running on a staging environment. So if I go create cluster, bare OS physical servers, you can blend these together if you really wanted to. I didn't think I had any nodes in this environment. That's why I came here. That's terrible. I must have built a cluster. I'm just going to go one click and get rid of this.
Actually, while you're doing this,
Go.
let's take a moment and we've focused on the platform, logs for the platform and all that. So now we have a good base of understanding of the purpose of FluentBit and FluentD and filters, inputs, outputs, how they work. So now let's take that knowledge and apply it to some custom applications running within the cluster. And beyond the obvious of getting your applications logs out, which is always a nice thing, there's another piece to this. And that is, I would say in general, the developers, when they approach logging and such, they want to do as little as possible and be spoon-fed everything. The correlation, the metrics, the logs, everything up together. I know I do. And the nice thing here is with something like Fluent, you can tell your developers to just write to standard out. And that, having said that, makes their development a lot easier because of developing locally, standard out's very easy to get to within an IDE. And then when you move up to promote it up to, some environment on the platform, some, staging or QA environment on the platform, you're still going to standard out. And then you go up to production. The ideal thing is you're always looking at the same way to output things. So the logs are always going to be the same format, the same everything as you promote the application through. So that kind of creates a bit of a contract here, right? Developer, just use standard out. And I will make sure I'm watching that on any pods that you spin up. I will make sure that daemon is running and watching standard out on your pod for anything that spins up. So there's no real work there to be done beyond, I'll make sure that FluentD is deploying properly, but that's kind of a one and done thing. And then from that point forward, the developer can just go and, kill pods, throw up pods, do all kinds of deployments, whatever they want to do. And they're going to consistently get that Fluent process running in there. So it creates a very nice contract between the platform, and the operators running it and the developer because we're using the best of both worlds. So it's a very natural thing between the two. Anyway, yeah. Fluent as a developer, Fluent is actually, it's something that I never see, which is by design, but it's something that is so powerful for me because I pushed my deployment up, my pod spun up, I went over to some other platform like Splunk or something, and magically they're there. I don't know how this happened, but the platform operators are unbelievable magicians.
It is like magic. It is. Just to cap off what I was going to show here, if you are 100% new to Platform 9 and either the free product or growth or enterprise, attaching a node is exactly the same way. You can just download a CLI, run config set, put in your details, and then prep node, and it will attach each of those nodes. So this is the quick way to get started.
I'm reading a question.
David, I think the next question from David, I think we can probably take offline. We've got two Davids. David the panelist, David that's asking questions. Yeah, I think we should definitely connect offline to dive a little bit deeper into your question around power DNS. Within each cluster, we're deploying an operating core DNS as part of Kubernetes. That's not to say that you can't use an external DNS configuration as well. If you need a closed off system, then yes, I would deploy everything together, assuming that you're okay with the resiliency of having your, say, an Elasticsearch running within the same cluster as FluentD. That is a great way to get going. I would step through that here, but that Helm chart and explaining that becomes a little bit more complicated. I do have a blog on it. With Elk, the required baseline for that is some form of storage, be it local to the nodes itself or external. So I would say it's pretty easy to get going. You just need a CSI driver and a storage class defined, and then Elk will deploy. The catch with Elk, and you'll see it outlined in the blog we have up on Platform 9 as well, is the configuration of the JVMs that Elastic's using. You really do make sure that that's tuned. It's an application. If you specify RAM that's not available, the JVM is going to have problems. If you put too little, the application is going to have problems. So that's definitely one consideration for Elastic. How you want to access it as well, be it a load balancer or a node port, is also a consideration. We'll put MetalLB down so you can use a load balancer, and then also Kabana as well. So it's a 3-step process. There's nothing complicated about it. You just sort of got to know those fundamentals as well.
Kind of an interesting configuration you just kind of showed me there is thinking about DNS and all that, and how painful it is sometimes to get access to a cluster. Obviously, you want to lessen your footprint as much as possible, public footprint to any workload. So you could actually have Fluent running on either side of your log store, right? Let's say on the north side of that, or really, let's just say on one side of it, you have your application or your system and everything that Fluent's capturing the logs and writing it to Elasticsearch, something like that, some store. Then, but you don't necessarily want to expose Elasticsearch or that data store publicly. So on the other side of that, you could have another Fluent instance watching for things being run in there, and it can be throttled a little bit, watching for things being written to Elasticsearch, and then writing to some public place, right? Like Chris had put in his creds in a URL for Splunk, something like that. So the nice thing is there you can kind of throttle what's going on. Maybe the application is just spitting out a ton of information, and that's fine. The Elasticsearch, because it's local in the cluster, it can handle that much bandwidth. But then the other side of that, going to Splunk, because you're going outside the cluster, I need to throttle that. I want to slow that down a little bit and just drain the data store every once in a while or something like that. An interesting one that I'm thinking about.
Yeah. David had asked to sort of go through the product a little bit more. So what I just did then, I just grabbed a kube config and opened up the Kubernetes dashboard that we ship as an add-on as part of the platform. If I want to look at the individual nodes within a cluster, I can come in here and go to nodes. You'll see again Grafana, Kubernetes dashboard, and kube config are always available. If you want to see node itself, you can drill into that, see information about that. This page is about to get a facelift next week. You can see the cluster details, networking. You can see I'm not running the application load balancer here. You can see I'm running Rook Ceph on this cluster, so I do have persistent storage, hence the name Rook. We can see deployed apps that we've used the Helm service to deploy. This will go and look out and live scan all of the namespaces in real time. This is why it's taking a little bit. The faster the cluster, the faster the response. This will pick up all Helm applications as well. So if you've used Helm from a desktop client, this page will collect that information as well. The other piece that we're shipping is Grafana and monitoring. And we connect to Alert Manager as it's configured in the cluster, and we bring all the information up here as well. So you don't have to worry about drilling into that Grafana instance to see alarms. You can just come straight to your cluster or the monitoring dashboard, and you can see active alarms that are firing. If you want to ignore one, choose it, click snooze, choose a time frame, and that alarm will be snoozed from Alert Manager. So that's another piece that we've built in. We're also extending out the monitoring capabilities because we understand that running some of this stuff yourself is not completely easy and simple. So we're building out this overview dashboard that will connect across all clusters, be it EKS, AKS, GKE, VeroS VMs or physicals, and it'll collect that data and display it. I think the simple node cluster I just built is causing me a slight delay in rendering some of these things. But these dashboards are here as well, so you can see the alarms. You can see all the rules that we're shipping with as well. And over the course of the rest of the year, we're working at introducing the ability to start customizing these too. So we are at the top of the hour.
We are.
As we say as we said with all these sessions, if people have topics they would like to see, reach out to us on Slack or the communities, or email. So it would be good to get some input for our next sessions. June 10th is our next Ask Us Anything session, and we're actually going to be covering Kubernetes security. And as part of that session, we have a guest co-host that will be joining Platform 9 from NewVector. They've got a pretty interesting way of monitoring what's going on within a Kubernetes cluster as well as a network as well. So we thought there'd be a fun group to come in and chat about. They live in the security world and we'll be covering security topics.
Hey, Chris, would you mind the YAML that you showed for that FluentD and the FluentBit Helm deployments? Would you mind posting that YAML in the AMA channel, please?
I can. As you can see, I have them here. This is FluentD Spark, FluentBit as well. So I'll definitely post both of these. If you use my token, well, I guess.
Oh, well, you can probably remove that.
I can remove that, yeah. If not, those trials are going to finish in a couple of days anyway. So not a huge problem. Just to David, to your last question, I think we should definitely take that one offline and get one of our pre-sales or solution architects to connect with you on that as well. So if you would like to reach out on Slack, or you can email me at here. I'll just shoot my email out to David. We should connect over email for these questions. Slack, we can do slack.platform9.io is our public Slack space. We also have a community at community.platform9.com as well that you can reach out to us to.
The Slack, that slack.platform9.io, that's where the AMA channel is though, right?
Correct.
Yeah, and that's where the YAML will be. Okay.
Cool. And with that, we're at the top of the hour. I unfortunately am tightly booked today, so we will be dropping off. Hopefully that was helpful to everyone. I know we focused a bit more on FluentD and FluentBit, but it's the good place to start. So thank you all for your time, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody.